Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show for Monday, October 16th. I'm Chris Manning. That man over there is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, please subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. Give us 5-star reviews only, and hit subscribe on the Just Basketball Fans YouTube channel on the road to 1,000. Help us get there. I want to tell you about our friends at Homage, too. Homage is an ultra-comfortable specialty apparel company with NBA and WNBA licenses that uses vintage-inspired designs to pay homage to the greatest stories, traditions, and figures across sports, music, and pop culture. Use our link below in the description to make your purchase and support the Just Basketball Show. I myself am considering an Impulse New York Liberty hoodie purchase from our friends at Homage after that finals performance. And that's where we're going to start today. WNBA Finals Game 3. The New York Liberty take this one. It's back home. I think, Brendan, the big story and where we should start with this from a performance standpoint, we'll get to the Chelsea Gray injury, is the New York Liberty's defense. This was a night and day defensive performance from the Liberty, who were absolutely, I think, fair to say, decimated defensively those first two games. And this was the top level defensive performance they needed to get back in this series, at least for one game.
It was. They controlled the pace. We talked about that coming off the last game, that if you could just force the Aces into more of a half-court environment, I think that obviously does wonders. That is the element that they just are going to struggle with since losing Candace Parker. I thought that they, in particular, Laney and Sabrina Ionescu, had incredible on-ball defensive games. Laney, you kind of expect that from. I think Sabrina deserves a really big shout-out for embracing that necessity on that end tonight, and 11 assists from her as well. Just a very uncharacteristic but very, very strong game from Sabrina. And then that allowed Stewie and Jonquel Jones to accumulate 5 blocks between the two of them. And I think when you kind of just add up those different components, that's how you get a game where where Vegas only scores 73 points, Chris, and nobody, I don't think you would say on the Vegas side, had a great game. Kelsey Plum with 29 points, but shot worse than 50% from the field, had more turnovers and assists, and wasn't really dominant in her own right at all. So that's how you turn the tide of a series. That's how you control a game. That's what the Liberty have done all season in order to kind of exert their influence and play games on their terms, and that's what we saw.
Who do you think is at the center of this defensive performance for the Liberty, as I think where I want to move this? Because you could answer this in a bunch of different ways, I think. You could say Brianna Stewart, who I thought as a shot blocker, as a rim protector, was just everywhere. I mean, she had blocks on the perimeter. She had the block of A'ja Wilson, where A'ja, I mean, it was more in some ways like A'ja making a bad decision because she just didn't look. And she probably gets away with that against most other teams and most other players. But when it's Brianna Stewart, it's kind of just hard to get away with not looking for a shot you just assume you're going to get off. Mm-hmm. You could go with Jonquel Jones because Jonquel Jones was switching onto guard. She was defending the rim. She was rebounding. She was doing everything. And then you have Batonji Laney, who's effectively took Jackie Young, I think, out of this game. If you look at Jackie Young through the first few games, she was the real ceiling raiser, I think, in a lot of ways for the Aces. She was 2-9 from the field in this game, 0-3 from 3. Had 5 assists, 1 turnover, so she did okay as a passer, but wasn't the scorer that she was in the first few games, and that in a way that really, I think, brought this back to earth for the Liberty, made the Aces easier to defend. So, I mean, if you're going to look at those 3 players, I think, above the rest, who to you was the defensive tone center? Who was at the center of this turnaround for New York?
I think it has to be Jonquel Jones, personally.
Yeah, I agree.
When you kind of factor in the fact that she not only was doing the rim protection, help defensive components that you mentioned, the fact that she was switching onto some of those guards, but I would add another layer to it, which is she pretty much clamped down A'ja in isolation the majority of the time. And then another part of it, too, was I would say the best thing A'ja did tonight, aside from getting to the free throw line, although it's kind of connected to what I'm going to say, is she was just a beast on the offensive glass. She only got 3, but she was really impacting the boards all day. But even to end up only limiting her to 3, I think speaks to JJ's rebounding prowess as well, and even just getting a hand on some of those, even though she only got 8, Stewie got 12, and you had Vandersloot with 7. It was, a night where the Aces were able, or the Liberty were able to control the glass anyway. So you add all that up, and I think it has to be her. And yeah, I guess the blocks kind of turned into turnovers, but I think it's all connected, right? Because I think another big thing that the team as a whole did is just turn their defense into offense at a really high level. And so I don't know if that's any one person, but that's probably the other part that I would really emphasize is the Liberty tonight had 13 points off turnovers and 12 fast break points. That's basically the difference. The Aces only had 2 fast break points. That's a 10-point differential there in that one category, and the final score was only 14 points apart. You know what I mean? And we know pace has been so important. So I would say it's those two things. It's Jones as an individual player being everywhere, and then it's the ability to really press and turn those, not always turnovers, but even just stops into offense on the other side.
Yeah, I think Betnijah Laney would be like my 2.
Yeah.
Which just feels weird to put Stewie at 3 because of how good Stewie was. And Stewie had the high rate real plays. When you're going to clip this game out, it's going to be a lot of Breanna Stewart blocking shots. But Laney, I think particularly if we're going to look at this going forward a little bit and what if this game was replicable for the Liberty, I think that adjustment and just having her do what she did on Young and really prioritize that. And I think kind of trust everyone else to be on a string and to be active. And Sabrina Ionescu, to her credit, was part of that by kind of being everywhere, putting her body on the line in spots and being in passing lanes. That to me feels like something you can replicate and build a scheme around as much as Jonquel Jones. Jonquel Jones is absolutely one, you're right, because she makes what we're talking about with Laney possible. But the Laney part is the layer. If that's, I don't have a good food analogy in front of me in my head right now, but if this was like a trifle, do they have trifles in Arizona? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Like a cake with some cream and fruit and stuff.
Yeah, and it's stacked on top of each other.
Yeah.
It's the cake is the core of that, but then it's the cream and fruit layer on top of that is Laney, and then Stewie's the whatever other kind of things you're going to throw in there. She's the fun stuff on top of that because she can be everywhere else and do all this other stuff and switch and be everywhere. This is, I think, Brendan, the other part of this that's just impressive is when we were looking at the series and thinking about the levers the Liberty could pull, at least I looked at it and thought, okay, do they have to just go all out on offense and try to outscore the Aces? They kind of did a very classical, really good team thing, regardless of gender in basketball, which is pull a defensive performance, betting on your talent to be able to play defense at a high level when you absolutely need them to. This is just proof of them just being as good as they are. As bad as they were in games 1 and 2, this is maybe the best version of the Liberty in some ways when their defense looks like this and it makes everything easier. The fast break point thing is a great shout on your part. Yeah,
you're not going to win, I think, playing the opponent's game. And this is how the Liberty have been able to win all season. And so it doesn't necessarily surprise me that this was the recipe tonight. I would even say, it was a group effort against Chelsea Gray, but I think that can transition us to the injury a little bit too. But even before Chelsea Gray goes down with the ankle thing about 4:49 of the fourth quarter, she was silenced. She was erased in this game. And that was the switching, which you pointed out, but it was also a little bit of Laney. They would start possessions with Stewie on Gray at times, and it was all sorts of different looks that they were giving her. But when she is able to control the pace, make some of those outlet passes and just magic kind of playmaking moments, plus get to her mid-range pull-up in the half court, the Aces are unstoppable. I mean, that's what happened in last year's finals. That's why she was the finals MVP last year. It just is an element that is the last little ingredient where you no longer can stop them because they're spaced. They have Asia. They have good role players in terms of literally ROLL on the screen when Gray is running the pick and roll. And when she's able to be a threat, it just kind of gives you no answers. And so to make her into a 4 of 12 night, only 2 assists, which is crazy after how great she was in those first 2 games. You just cut off the head of the snake, and it's kind of a lot more confusing, a lot more overthinking, and a lot less efficient, and that's what we saw. But I just saw a clip of Becky Hammond, Chris, post-game, and it sounds like she's expecting at least next game. Like, she's speaking in a way where it's not like we're optimistic we're going to have her at least on, what is the next game, Wednesday. It doesn't sound like she thinks that's going to happen.
So, yeah, Chelsea Gray is maybe, I think, considering her importance to the Liberty, or importance to the Aces, importance to this matchup, her stature and just kind of how she makes everything work for the Aces, and I think really allows Plum and Young to kind of do what they're best at. This is a really devastating injury to the Aces. This is just a devastating injury on a human level. I mean, it didn't, like, in real time, until they slowed it down, it wasn't clear to me, at least, what exactly happened. People in person, I'm curious to see how it looked depending on your vantage point. She stays in for a minute, and then they end up calling a timeout. She says on the bench, they caught her on camera, on television, my ankle popped. Mm-hmm. She goes back to the locker room. They show her trying to walk, and then eventually she's helped by 2 people down the tunnel.
Yeah.
That did not feel like an injury that we have seen that happen before. Sometimes, like, the adrenaline, like, things just are better than you think in real time. And
she took the shot. That was the funny part. She took a pull-up 3 right after, in the moment when she stayed in that you mentioned. She missed it. It wasn't off like something seriously wrong here. It's like, I'm not comparing the injuries, but didn't Rondo one time take a 3 after he tore his ACL or whatever it was? Like, yeah, it does happen, but
isn't that like a Kobe thing as well, where he did something
when he tore the Achilles, he shot his free throws, same as Clay with the ACL with his free throws. Free throws are a little different, so. But to take a full-on, like, I'm running a pick and roll and launching a 3 was crazy. But, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It definitely looked significant. She was in a lot of pain. It sounds like she was on crutches as she was exiting the locker room. Doesn't sound good, but if you're talking about it big picture, it's probably a serious sprain, right? Like, that would be the easiest guess right now. Just like a pretty intense ankle sprain.
Let's assume she's out Wednesday. Even if it's a high ankle sprain of some kind or something serious, it's hard to imagine her at 100% in a week. I think when would game 5 be?
I think it's next Sunday. I think so.
So like that maybe gives you time, and you're back home and all that stuff. But yeah, this would be. Okay, actually, it says game 5 when I googled this. Maybe Google's wrong, but it says Friday. It says Friday night. It's Friday night, so quicker turnaround. So this would be Friday night, 9 p.m. That's less time.
Yep.
This is the kind of injury, Brendan, that I think if she misses these next 2 games, and I am aware that I am the person who said on our last show that the series was over. I'm fully aware that I said that, and I own it. This is the kind of thing that opens the door for the Liberty to come back and win this series. There is not anyone that the Aces can put in, all due respect to their bench players, that can replicate a bit of what Chelsea Gray does. They could ask more of Kelsey Plum. I think that would be the first thing I would probably do is put the ball in Kelsey Plum's hands more. But it's not going to replicate the steadiness, some of the mid-range shot making, the size that I think Chelsea Gray is giving you at her position. And I think big picture, this makes the Liberty's defensive job, coming off of this game where they were great on defense, it makes their job simpler. Now you can probably put more bodies on the floor to counteract Plum. Laney can be pretty much stashed on Jackie Young, and you don't have to worry about that. If you need to, you can turn up the offensive dial a little bit and say, hey, and they did this a little bit in this game, we can put Ionescu and Vandersloot and Johannes all on the floor together, and you're probably not as worried about getting punished for it because of what the Aces have to do now. This is going to ask a lot of Asia Wilson. This is going to ask a lot of Kelsey Plum. But the door is now, because of this injury, unfortunately, on top of that performance, the door is just now more open for the Liberty to win Game 4 at home and to get to Game 5 where anything absolutely could happen, even if it's back in Las Vegas.
Definitely. I think those are all great points. To me, there's nobody to replace her, right? Because just as a refresher for people, like Candace Parker is out. We mentioned that a minute ago, but Raquana Williams is also away from the team as she deals with criminal allegations. The bench just didn't have much besides that. I mean, when you spend really big on your top 8 in the WNBA, you're not going to have a lot of room with the hard cap to get a lot of other difference makers. I think we saw Kirsten Bell come in right after the Gray injury. Here's the sequence that followed. Jackie Young got her pocket picked because she was taking the ball up the floor, and Laney got a layup. We saw Kirsten Bell misjudge a back cut defensively, gave up a mismatch where she was trying to guard Jonquel Jones in the post. JJ got a layup. Then back on offense, Bell turns it over directly because she botched a catch in the corner. That was 2 or 3 possessions. Becky Hammond bailed on that experiment, and Kia Stokes came back in, and they closed the game big. So I don't know if that's tenable. I don't think Kirsten Bell is enough of a threat offensively that you can roll with her. I think what the most likely situation is that they are a little bit quicker with their rotations, but I think Sydney Colson might start game 4. Would be my guess, because she has kind of been on ice for a lot of the season. She's not really somebody who plays a lot of minutes for this team because their top 7, 8, 9 is so good, but she is pretty reliable, had a few moments over the course of the season when she did play. She's not some sort of Udonis Haslem, just washed, I'm on the bench to kind of be an assistant coach. She can play, and she gives them as close to a real point guard as they have aside from Chelsea Gray. So I would think she is probably the other person in the starting lineup. I'm not saying she plays 40 minutes. That's kind of where I think they would go. But I think flipping to the other team, as you just mentioned, is maybe the place to close it out, because the ripple effects of that are exactly what you mentioned. I thought this was a worst-case scenario game for Maureen Johannes. I thought she was pretty terrible tonight, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
She played 6 minutes in the first half, didn't make a shot. She comes back in the fourth quarter, misses a 3 on the first Liberty possession of the fourth, and then turns the ball over on the next Liberty possession, trying to make a really fancy drop pass to Jonquel Jones. I thought Kelsey Plum just bullied her defensively, and if the Gray injury doesn't happen, if maybe the game closes a little bit more neck and neck, it's the kind of game where we would probably have been saying Maureen Johannes needs to be benched for game 4. But if you're talking about a depleted Aces squad and somebody like Colson is out there more, somebody like Bell is out there more, the defensive concerns aren't as big of a problem. Johannes becomes playable. Some of those small lineups become playable. They opened the fourth quarter with a really small lineup with Maureen Johannes and Courtney Vandersloot in there. It was like a minute or two, and they lost those minutes 7-3, and Stewie had to check back in. So there's all these red flags that you saw that just kind of go away if the matchups aren't as scary, frankly. So it's just going to require more from Plum and Young. I mean, there's really no other way to put it, but it's going to be a pretty heavy lift for sure.
Plum and Young are probably playing 40 minutes in the next game.
Well, Plum played 40 tonight, and she had foul trouble. So, yeah, I would say it's going to have to be one of those nights. I mean, this is how they played, just to maybe give a little bit of context, too, here. This is how they played before they got Chelsea Gray. They only got Chelsea Gray a few years ago. So they had Sydney Colson, who's been on this team for a while, playing minutes back then. Lindsay Allen, who was on the Lynx this year. She was a starting point guard for this team at one point. They've had, kind of by committee with Dearica Hamby being somewhat of a playmaker. And they had Kayla McBride also on the Lynx this year, who was kind of a comfortable combo guard at an earlier iteration of this squad. So they've done this before, but there's a reason that they made and won the finals once they made the finals at the bubble too, but why Chelsea Gray made such a difference. You remove her, and this is a version of a team that struggled to get over the hump for a reason, and it's probably a thinner version because they don't have the by committee approach anymore. It had to be her, so now it's going to be a lot harder.
Yeah, and look, I think the other option, just to say, would probably be to start Clark, but I think we just see the Liberty just don't care when she has the ball in the perimeter.
They'll close with her either way, right? Like Sydney Colson's not closing, so you're right. That's the lineup. It's just how do you fill the other minutes?
Yeah, I think if I'm looking at Game 4, the X factor for for Las Vegas, it has to be Kelsey Plum. I think this is, if there's ever a time for her to absorb some of what Chelsea Gray does, and that's probably a long-term thing for the Aces is they team build and they plan for the future. This is kind of the spot where you need her to do it right now, which is going to be an ask. It's not going to be easy. She's not as big as Chelsea Gray is, and that's a huge part of Chelsea Gray's game and the footwork inside. But like Chelsea Gray, at some point in Game 4, Brendan, the first time it happens, Jonquel Jones is going to switch on to Kelsey Plum, and I'm going to be zeroed in on that every time it happens. It's going to be maybe the deciding thing, because that was one of the deciding things of this game. I think it's going to be one of the deciding things in Game 4. Also, before we transition, I want to give you kudos for using a Gen Z phrase in Red Flags. Good for you. That's a big Gen Z. That's a big Gen Z TikTok thing. So I'm just
You're welcome.
Thanks for giving us some youthful energy here on the show, because I'm like 90 years old spiritually. All right, moving on. What matters most preseason edition? Here are the three. You've thrown this in there. I'm gonna give you the three things, and I have a clear answer for this, and I'm curious to see if you go the same way. Here are the three things. Jrue Holiday coming off the bench for the Boston Celtics, the New Orleans Pelicans' lack of defensive effort, and Victor Wembanyama looking like an all-star. I do want to say, Brendan, despite that he's not Wemby guy, you called him Wemby in the outline, and I just feel like you need to be called on the floor for this.
No, that's absolutely fair. I didn't realize I did that. Okay, let's just clarify first. Is it an overstatement for me to say he's looked like an all-star? Because I kind of set aside the nickname stuff. I hesitated to jump the gun that much, but in his first two preseason games as a member of the San Antonio Spurs, he has 20 points and then 23 points. 10 combined three-point attempts, shot 60+% from the field in both, had a bunch of highlight reel. I saw a post on the NBA subreddit, Chris, that had 13 bullet points of highlights of just these two preseason games.
Yeah, I consumed
All-star.
the same thing. Yeah. So
I mean, that's what he looks like. I'm not trying to predict. I'm not making my all-star predictions in October. I'm just saying, that's kind of the caliber of thing that he's looked like. And so that's my answer. If we're on the same page that he's been a freak, that just looks a lot. He looks a lot more ready to impact winning, especially on the offensive end, than I ever would have guessed. So that's my pick of the what matters most here between those three things.
So I think that's very valid. I think the one I don't care about is the Pelicans, because it's the preseason and sometimes this is weird. But if Zion is getting cooked in the regular season in a week and we're zooming in on him, and that's my Instagram feed is just, and TikTok feed is just like Zion getting cooked in isolation, we're gonna have to have a discussion here on the Just Basketball show about that. But Wemby's Vic is the correct answer, probably, but I went Jrue Holiday.
Okay.
That is something that is shaping how a title contender is going to play basketball. So I default to that. Vic is going to be awesome either one. He has done things that are just absolutely freakish. He's getting beat sometimes, and he just turns around and puts his arm up, and it's oh, okay, he just blocked the shot anyway. It doesn't matter. And
there's already becoming a meme format, basically, on NBA internet of guys' face when Vic does insane shit to them. We had Thomas Bryant getting dunked on and not even realizing Victor Wembanyama, could physically be in the place above Thomas Bryant, who's 7 feet tall's head, that he ended up being. We had Jalen Williams getting we talk about
the Jalen
guards.
Williams one is
recovering when they get beat on a screen and they recover to contest from behind or stay in the play. Vic just does that blocking dunks, and Jalen Williams had a reaction to that one. But okay, tell me if you think it's the Jrue Holiday one though.
Him putting his arms in the air, doing the Luke Cornett. It's.
Yes.
I think it's just now the Victor. It's now just the Victor Wembanyama. It's no longer the Luke Cornett.
And I feel like if somebody has too much of a line drive jumper, it might just get blocked with that. I'm not convinced that actually that's not going to turn into a block. Cornett, I never think it is. But you add 2 inches and maybe 4 inches on the wingspan, and I'm kind of actually wondering if maybe he gets a hand on one.
Isaac Okoro is so fucked when the Cavs play the Spurs.
Yes, exactly. There are certain players in this league who actually have to watch out for that. But okay, if the Jrue Holiday one is the most impactful, most important, I think I probably agree with the way you put it. Is it the right call, the wrong call? What do you think about him actually as the move that they made? Is it good?
I kind of like it as a way to manage Jrue Holiday's workload.
What about managing Al Horford's workload? Because he's the guy starting.
Here's the thing. They put themselves in this position where like Al Horford just has to play a lot of minutes, and like how they fill Horford minutes, like if he doesn't play back to backs, let's say, is going to just be like fascinating. You know, like it's that's one of the real big questions I think when we get to our Celtics preview is just like how do you like assume Al Horford's going to be able to tap into the fountain of youth for another season? Like it's a really big bet.
I'm not really sure he has to play a lot of minutes, though. That's part of what worries me about him starting in the first place is like, okay, we don't have to like pretend as if Luke Cornett is some sort of sure thing, but if you just say we're going to only really have one big at a time on the court, right, then guys like Hauser, O'Shea Brissett, Peyton Pritchard, I do kind of trust. Maybe Jordan Walsh gets in there and makes an impact in small minutes as a rookie. That's kind of what I thought they would do. Not start two bigs and then kind of pigeonhole yourself into now we have to play Cornett. Now Horford is maybe our starting 4 and backup 5, and that just increases his minutes. It just seems like a weird thing to do, and it feels like maybe they're just doing it for Horford's pride and because Jrue Holiday's like a good dude who will accept it. It feels a little more political than basketball to me.
That feels very possible, and I honestly, there's times where I don't understand what Joe Mazzulla, what goes on in his brain. So, like, sure, like you could tell me that's the case. I mean,
did you listen to him on Old Man in the 3? By the way,
no, I only saw the clip where JJ's like, "You did lose to the 8 seed, my guy."
Yeah, that was kind of funny,
That's
but it's a good interview.
I have that.
I came away respecting him
yeah.
more. It's a good one, and it makes him a little more human and a little less robotic. And he was pretty humble about like I was kind of just going through the motions. I did not have time to implement stuff, and I made mistakes. And I think that's all you can kind of hope for. But you're not worried about the Holiday thing. You're not worried about Horford.
I'm a little worried. I think like it is like a bold choice to do this. I think it would be more seamless for like rotating in your other good players, i.e. like Peyton Pritchard, to just start Jrue Holiday. But I wonder how much of the calculus of this also has to do with Porzingis and wanting to kind of give Porzingis the right structure to let him succeed. I think that has to be considered part of this. Like I think a lot of their bet this year and in the future is on making this Porzingis thing work. That's why they just extended him. That's what happens when you trade a franchise lifeline in Marcus Smart for someone like Porzingis, right?
Sure.
I'm viewing so many Celtics decisions through the Kristaps Porzingis lens in a way that I might be overdoing it, but that's where my brain went with this. Also, Jrue Holiday is going to close. That like ultimately, when it's Game 7 against the Bucks, who's going to be defending Damian Lillard? It's going to be Jrue fucking Holiday. Like that's not even a question.
Yeah, the better question with closing might actually sometimes be Holiday or White. Because there are going to be matchups where they do need to close with Horford, especially in the postseason. Like, I'm not denying Horford's importance to the team, but I'm almost emphasizing the importance by saying save him, you know? But, it's also the kind of thing where if Horford has even a minor injury and ends up missing games, then Mazzulla kind of gets the freedom to be like, okay, Al. And when you come back, you're going to be coming off the bench. You know, like we did it. And then you proved us right, which is that you're injury prone because, of course, you're almost 40 years old. You should be injury prone. So now you're going to play your 12 minutes off the bench, and O'Shea is going to get back in the rotation, and we'll go back to what everyone thought we were going to do. I feel like that could happen.
Yes.
Can we move on to some slop that gets us into the Phoenix realm here?
Brendon, I love some slop. Tell us about the slop.
A reminder, as always, for anybody not knowing what Slop of the Week is, it is the little nuggets that places like Hoops Hype, the NBA subreddit, NBA Twitter love to give us, and people do, the yeoman's work of finding and disseminating these things so that we don't even have to. But in this case, it was Zach Lowe on his Low Post podcast talking about the Miami Heat, who have now swung and missed on 453,000 straight stars that they have wanted to trade for, allegedly. One of them being Bradley Beal, which is why this has a Suns connection. And Zach Lowe basically said that part of why the Heat did not pursue Beal all that aggressively. Now, of course, he had a no-trade clause, but if you have read a little bit of the coverage since, it wasn't such a no-brainer that he came. It's not like it was only Phoenix for him. And so it does seem like Miami had a shot. The salary played a part. But the other thing that seemed to weigh pretty heavily for them, according to Zach Lowe, Chris, is they don't consider Beal to be a huge upgrade over Tyler Herro. This is just as sloppy as slop gets. I really love it. So what do you think? Is he better than Tyler Herro? Is this the stupidest report of all time? Where are we here?
My brain just went to, they saw Tyler Herro removing his Heat affiliations on social media and like just kind of like having fun with the fact that he was in trade rumors in media day and being like, yeah, we got to like make sure Tyler Herro knows that we love him.
How much better than Herro is Beal? In your consideration,
I think. I mean, I would rather pay Tyler Herro's contract. Is the way I would maybe answer this. If I'm the Heat, I kind of understand this calculus because it's like, do you want to be paying Bradley Beal all of that money when he's like not hit the highs of, let's say, a Damian Lillard?
But that's not what they really are saying, though. They're comparing it to Herro.
Yeah, but I just think
you're just saying Lillard
stuff,
makes the same amount, so that's the comp.
Yeah, and I just think the contract stuff, whether it's fair or not, I do think if we're like thinking about this in terms of trades, not just like blind rankings, I do think the contract stuff like factors into this. Even if like they're never going to say that, I do just think it's baked into player value at this point to some degree.
What's funny though is you say they wouldn't ever say that. I actually think that's a much safer thing to say. Hey, Beal just costs too much for what we think his production is going to be, so we didn't want to do it. We actively think our 25-year-old unproven dude is better than the all-star, all-NBA guy who went to Phoenix. That's like actually ballsier thing to let get out than he just costs too much.
No, but I think you're wrong about this because I think the thing you do this is a messaging question. Mm-hmm. It's not a clean, simple message and like sends a great like sense of belief to your guy when you're like, we don't actually think he's better, but his contract's a better value. You just need to say that he's better, even if you actually don't fully believe that, and it has contract. It's like you have to think that the message has to be as clear as possible.
Did the Knicks last summer say RJ Barrett was better than Donovan Mitchell? Did the Knicks say that?
If they did, crazy talk from the Knicks if that's the case.
Yeah, probably a harder case to make, even to RJ. Even RJ would have been like, okay, come on, no, he's not.
Also, there's also a difference in like, okay, if it's New York, the New York Post, all of the outlets covering the Knicks are just going to shit on the Knicks for that. Mm-hmm. If it's Miami, that doesn't exactly happen in the same way based on how we've seen the Dame coverage, I think, unfold.
Miami media eats up whatever the Heat say, so yeah, that's fair. I think Beal's significantly better, but
he is. He is, but is he? But if you're the Heat and you have like kind of one move with Herro, I get it. You know what I mean? I get kind of posturing this in that sense. But I think that does take us to the Suns preview. Yeah, huge season for Tyler Herro. So if you're tuning in for the first one of these previews, here's how we do it. Most important player will be talking about at the end of the season. Best lineup. Best case scenario, worst case scenario, and the over-under in terms of their Vegas win totals. Brendan, this is, for me, the most important player is Bradley Beal, and it's not really even a question. I just think you bring him in, and I think you could argue Durant. I think you could argue Booker. I think I'm going to throw some love Booker's way later in a question I'm going to ask you, and he's my answer to that question, so we'll get to that. But I think this is a big bet on Bradley Beal adjusting, and a big bet on Bradley Beal doing something we have not seen him really do in the NBA, as be the third guy, and also play in a winning basketball environment for the first time in a while. Brendan, I'm going to ask you a question, a trivia question here. What season was the last time Bradley Beal was on a team where, based on their net rating, they had an expected 500 or better win total?
Was it the year with Russ? The bubble year?
It's 17-18.
Okay.
So this is pre-COVID. That's an eternity in the NBA. That long without playing winning basketball, two-way basketball is a big deal. He's had some injury concerns since then. I certainly think you should expect an uptick in effort and whatnot when you're out of the environment he was in DC. But this is a bet on Bradley Beal proving the best version of himself correct by making this trade and going out to get him. That is my view on Bradley Beal on this team, and it's a very big bet in terms of the Suns' stakes and also a big financial bet considering what he's making.
All valid. How good do they need him to be to win a championship? What do they need him to do?
They need two things. They need him to hit a lot of catch and shoot threes, that's going to be a dial he needs to turn up. And they need him when KD inevitably misses 10 games or something, because it's going to happen. We kind of know KD's probably going to tweak an ankle and miss some time. That just happens at this point.
Or he'll sprain the exact same MCL in January that he has the past 2 years. Yeah.
Yes, it's just it's January 15th or whatever. Time for KD to land weird on his knee, and he's going to miss some time. He needs to eat a lot of innings and keep the offense afloat when that happens. And I think he also just has to be competent enough on defense. And if you're an opposing team, and you're let's say you're Denver, right? And you're thinking, okay, who on the perimeter are we going to try to target in these certain cases? It's not Booker. It's not Durant. It's not a Kogi if he's the fifth starter. Maybe it's the centers, which we'll talk about, I think, as a concern with this team. You've covered that well in Locked On Suns as well. I think the answer is going to be you're going to test Beal. Jamal Murray is going to test Beal in those situations. Yeah. There's a lot of two-way, I think, importance on what we're going to see from Beal, and I think that's what they need. It's sub all-star level adjusted play, eats a ton of innings and plays better when guys miss time. And then he holds up on defense in a way that we just kind of need to see improve it to do it.
Yeah, so now that we're past the trade, I agree with everything you said. I think I'll take issue, or not take issue. I'll push back on one part of it, but let me just preface by saying, now that we're past the trade and we're just analyzing him as a basketball player, I think everybody would agree what Bradley Beal provides for the Suns, the way that he fits with the star players that they had already in Booker and Durant, and just the overall upside of having him on your roster. Significant improvement over Landry Shamet and Chris Paul, which is effectively what they gave up to get him. So,
yes,
just to get that out of the way, I actually think one aspect of what you said, I've evolved my thinking on the more that I've heard from Frank Vogel and the more that I've watched them in preseason so far. I think Beal is going to actually be less of a Ray Allen in the '08 Celtics than I thought. I think he actually is going to play a lot of Beal ball here too. I don't think it'll just be that he's kind of running off screens and in the corner and okay, now Book's out, you do your thing, Brad. I think that they're encouraging him to be regular old Bradley Beal from Washington, even when he's out there with the best guys on this team. And we'll see, whether the usage has to come down inevitably and how the pecking order kind of shapes up and how each of the three stars pick their spots. But if you're making the best case, kind of the best case for Beal, I think there is a chance that he puts up stats and plays a similar type of style and role to what he was doing in Washington. I think that there's a real shot that all three of these guys are averaging 25 plus points a game and usage is really high, and it just comes kind of at the expense of everybody else. But my most important player is Kevin Durant.
Okay. Easy answer. It's my other choice.
So the Suns were 8-0 with him in the regular season last year, 14-5 overall. They posted a plus 18.4 net rating with Book and Durant on the court last year across the regular season and postseason, if I'm remembering right. Might have just been regular season. To me, the impact that he's going to have on this team night to night, most important and most noticeably, is actually on the defensive end. He's their best rim protector and their best non-center rebounder, and he's the guy that makes all their lineups he's the guy that if you think that they have lineup flexibility, he's why they have it, is how I would put it. And so he's going to have to be great on both ends, but I think most consistently and most importantly on defense for them to reach their ceiling. Coming off of the past two postseasons, I think there are some concerns about his ball handling and sort of his pure ISO creation ability. Just go get us a bucket no matter what. I don't know if in his mid-30s he's still that player. He's gotten his pocket picked and had some turnover problems, had some kind of pull-up three problems and things like that for now 2 playoffs, not just overreacting to one, but everybody looked ugly that year that they got swept by Boston with the Nets, and now he kind of had the same things crop up against the Clippers and Nuggets last year. But that's why he's playing with Devin Booker and Bradley Beal. So I think the ISO stuff can be alleviated. I think his defensive importance and lineup flexibility stuff is going to be huge for them. And obviously he's Kevin fucking Durant. He's going to score a lot and be really, really good at offense.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid answer. I think if you're going to build Brendon a situation like this where it all kind of has to flow together and kind of requires like some figuring out, I would bet on the one that has Kevin Durant because he's just malleable. And like he's never going to be a guy that's like pissed off because he's not getting enough like pick and roll ops run for him. Like he's just going to like
no. If he feels like he hasn't gotten a bucket in a minute, he's the guy who will just decide I'm running a pick and roll.
Yeah,
I'm not worried about that.
I'm trying to think. I was trying to find the tweet that he had that was just like I don't remember what it was or if it was like a bio. But then when I tweeted Kevin Durant hoop tweet, it was the "Who the fuck looks at graphs" tweet.
Shout out Matt Moore.
Yeah, shout out Matt Moore. That's a very I think valid answer. I think you could make a case for Devin Booker as well, just considering I think he's going to be the best guy in this team. And Brendon, who as far as Vogel has talked about it is going to be the de facto point guard, him or Beal?
I don't think they're going to have one. I think that they're going to try to turn defense into offense, play fast, and they're empowering everybody on the court, not just the stars, to take the ball up after a defensive possession, whether that's a Kogi, Eric Gordon, Grayson Allen. They're basically... Well, honestly, in the half court, I think Nurkic is actually the closest thing you're going to find to a guy whose job is to set the other players up as like a first and foremost offensive responsibility. Booker joked about it like he's our point guard, but actually in the half court, like in the regular season, he's going to be the initiator.
I was being glib about him like getting a rebound and saying, fuck it, it's Yusuf Nurkic time. Let me dribble up the floor.
Yeah,
that's
probably not going to be doing that. But in the half court, yes. So I think the answer is kind of everybody and nobody, point guard wise. They might try to acquire one over the course of the season, but we'll see. Who's your player we're going to be talking about by the end of the season? I'm very intrigued by what you had here because there's like 12 candidates.
So I went just like I picked my kind of player, and I went to one of the, I'm picking. No, I went to.
You literally said him as your kind of player last episode, so I figured. Yeah, it was
but
him.
I didn't want to like parody myself, Brendon. I do that enough in my daily life. Like I just am like a character of myself a lot of the time, but. I wanted to think about like who's going to scale up in the playoffs in a way that I trust, and like I have two options for this, so I'm going to give you two names.
Okay.
I think it's whoever pops more between Nasir Little and Yuta Watanabe. I think if this thing works, go ahead. You're going to tell me something.
No, I'm not going to disagree at all. I have it as the same exact thing, except for I have it as a tie between Nasir Little and Keita Bates-Diop, because I think those guys are a little more kind of one-to-one. I think Yuta's going to play no matter what, to your point.
I just really like Yuta. I think if the shooting stuff with him is real from Brooklyn, like you have just like a guy that can play 15, 20 minutes a game in the playoffs for you, or 10 if you really just need like 10 minutes of good forward play. I think my money would be on Yuta. I think Bates-Diop is the other way to the third name I would throw in here for sure. But I think it's which one of these role guys really becomes like your NBA nerd, is in Zach Lowe's Luke Walton All-Stars column at the end of the year, and like is the glue piece on a really, really great team. It's whatever one of these role guys that they've given themselves here. That's the answer to this question. And if I were to bet, it'd be like Yuta and tier 1, and then it's like Nas Little and Bates-Diop in round 2, and then like Grayson Allen's like in the third tier.
So, yeah, I think Grayson Allen's a different type of player. He's going to play no matter what, but he's more of a guard than a forward. So, I think...
And he's someone that I think, like, if it comes down to it, and they just said we need to put together, like, the best defensive line if we can, they're just going to take him off the floor because he would be the hunted one.
He's a better defender than Yuta Watanabe is.
But
Grayson Allen's a good defender. Yeah, it's the size thing. That's what I was saying. He's more of a guard than a forward. So I don't know if it's really going to be like Grayson versus. I mean, in like a game 7 when you're playing 7 guys, yes, but
that's what. Well, that's what I mean. And because when I think about like at this point in the, not so much with the Cavs, that we're going to talk about next because they have to like prove some shit, and like proves they're not going to shit the bed. But I think when I think about these really good teams, the best teams in the league, I kind of, maybe this is flawed, but I sometimes skip the process of the regular season and think, okay, what does this look like in the Western Conference Finals? That's where my head goes.
So I think Yuta Watanabe, the case against him is I'm not sure if he can play in the playoffs at that level. We've never seen that from him. His lack of force and physicality and size and athleticism and that kind of what you need a modern NBA wing to be way, I think could hold him back. We'll see. It's not like I have any evidence to say that. It's just sort of, physically really more than anything. But they absolutely need one of these guys to hit, because between Bates, Diop, and Little, and we can throw Watanabe and Allen in there, whatever, because it sounds like Josh Okogie's going to be in the starting lineup to start the season. It's an open question whether he's a playoff player either, because of his offensive limitations, and he was not really a playoff player last year. He did not perform well against Denver, even defensively, but especially offensively. And even if he does, let's say he has like the best season of his career, looks very playable, you just go through the West. LeBron James, Zion Williamson, Luka Doncic, Kawhi Leonard, even somebody like Jalen Williams in Oklahoma City. You need an answer to big forwards. And we just got done talking about what Kevin Durant can do. You can't ask him to also be guarding those guys. That's not reasonable. No. And so that's part of why I don't really think the Okogie thing is going to stick in the starting lineup, because I just don't think you can have a 6'5" dude, even as big and athletic as Okogie is. He can't be your answer on a night-to-night basis, being like, yeah, he'll just stick to Luka for 30 minutes tonight. That's not really what Okogie is. So I think Bates, Diop, Little, maybe a little Watanabe, maybe a little bit of a smaller guy like Allen or Gordon who can do it too. They're going to have to find what their answer is to that type of matchup. And I think whichever one of them becomes highest in the pecking order becomes like the single biggest hinge piece in the NBA come playoff time.
Yep.
Whoever we think it is by April, that guy is going to have some sort of article written about him or some sort of segment on NBA Today of, can Brendan, this guy get it done?
We will be doing that segment. We're going to be the Suns' first round series, X Factor, KD beats Diop. Like, we're headed there.
Pencil it in. It's literally right there. Yeah.
I'm putting it in pen. Like, not even the erasable kind of pen. Do you remember erasable pens?
I do remember erasable pens. Remember the kind of mechanical pencils that had like the plastic, the lead was in the plastic and you like loaded them in? What a weird time we lived through.
What a weird time. Now kids just get like Chromebooks at school.
Yep.
They don't even learn cursive anymore. See, again, I'm like 95 years old. All right, let's move on. Best lineup. Mm-hmm. Brendan, what was it last year? Because I know you do this research, and last year is a little bit weird, obviously. So, how did you delineate this?
So I actually didn't. Let me pull it up real quick because it was just such a mess. The Suns basically played three seasons last year.
No, we don't need to do it. I didn't do this. We don't need to do this. Here's my lineup. I'll just give you my gut, and you tell me how wrong I am. I think that's a good way to do this.
Okay.
Because this one is a little. I think this one is a little bit of projection. I think
I kind of cheated on this one. I did one that I think like it might not be a super duper high volume one, but that I think kind of speaks to something interesting about the team and could over the course of the season be statistically the best. So I went a little bit more like kind of cute with it. So you're free to do whatever you think.
All right, and I'm gonna like contradict myself based on what I just said to you, so that's fine. All right, I went Booker, Beal. I went Eric Gordon. I went KD beats Diop, and I went Durant. 5, I went Durant at the 5. Maybe they have to play zone. Maybe they have to come up. Frank Vogel's going to like be up at night freaking out about how to build the defense. I think that's kind of going to be the big challenge of his coaching job here. I just feel like this version of the Suns, whatever it is, whether it's Grayson Allen's in there, whether Watanabe's in there, I think the best version of this team is going to be Kevin Durant playing 5-up basketball, them just scoring a shit ton of points and wrecking teams that way, and the defense like holds up enough to make that work. I think that's the path here. I just don't trust Eubanks and Nurkic to be in the best lineup for the Suns when you look at it big picture.
And that's kind of the thing, right? I think statistically, I had basically identical one. I put Yuta in there just because I think his three-point shot is going to be more consistent. So if you're just kind of talking about like what would I bet on the five-man unit that's going to kick ass the most being, it's probably just the one where I trust the shooting, but I think this will pop as, when you go to Cleaning the Glass or NBA.com and you search five-man units, like it will be statistically the best one. The question is just how much can it play and all that type of thing. But so last year, I did pull it. It was Chris Paul, Devin Booker, Josh Okogie, Kevin Durant, and DeAndre Ayton. So if you just put Beal in there, that's the starting, and Nurkic, that's the starting lineup. And I think that one will probably be the one that plays the most. But I could see a version of this small ball lineup with all three of Booker, Beal, and Gordon, and then whoever you want at the 4 and Durant at the 5 as the best offensive lineup in the NBA. Whichever one the Suns settle on as their favorite of that type of lineup, I think will be the best offensive lineup in the entire NBA.
Yeah.
I don't think you'll be able to stop it.
There's a chance if we get Suns Nuggets in the playoffs that it's just like a scoring bonanza, and it's like
already kind of was
like,
last year with Chris Paul not wanting to take shots.
Yes, but this is like turn that dial up a lever, and it's like the Chiefs Rams Monday night game from a couple years ago.
I don't want to make you feel like time has passed very much, Chris, but I think that was like 5 years ago. I know your reference, but that was a very long time ago.
I had hair.
I believe that was when Jared Goff was still on the Rams, pre-COVID.
He was, yeah.
So,
yeah, he was.
Been a minute.
Here's the thing. It's been a minute, but that game was electric.
Kicked
That
ass.
game made me and also like it's not fair to like put that game like 1-1 on this because like I think maybe both these teams are Patrick Mahomes' Chiefs and not one of those teams is not the Rams. Like one of them is not like a system. This is just like pure cocaine basketball. Like that's what it's pure like basketball distilled into like cocaine scoring form is what this is.
Yeah.
I
feel like we're being very positive, so we should probably get best case done quickly and then do worst case and spend a little time on the obvious holes with this team because we're making it seem like this team's going to waltz into a championship, and I'm personally, as somebody who has a vested interest in that, getting a little nervous. So let's balance this out a little bit.
Wait till I shit on the Cavs next month. It's going to be great. All right, best case for me, win the title with overwhelming offense, and Devin Booker is an MVP-level first-team All-NBA guy. Brendan, here's my question for you related to Devin Booker. If someone from this team is going to win MVP this year, who is the player?
Yeah, it's him.
I tilted my hand. I think it's okay. That's it. I think Booker like this might be like a broader introduction of Booker in a bigger way to the.
So the number
like,
of Kevin Durant stans who have found my coverage and may find this episode who are already making me feel nervous about the fact that I am doing Steph better, but on a Phoenix scale, is nerve-wracking to me, and I don't want to contribute in any way, shape, or form to the eventual departure of Kevin Durant. I'm doing Book better on my podcast every day, and I'm doing it here, and I don't want to be seen. That's why I picked it. KD is most important. It's all part of the formula, so let's just keep it moving there, I think. I do think it would be Booker from a health standpoint, from an offensive workload standpoint, for everything else, but let's
KD might just play like 60 games. Like that just might be a thing.
Probably should. It's just a matter of how much he cares about the award stuff, I guess, with the 65 thing. For best case for me, I had one of the best offenses in NBA history in a championship.
Yes. Brendan, let's take a quick pause. I need to use the restroom real quick.
Okay.
Give me 1 sec. I can't hold it more. Hold on. Worst case, Brendan, I think this is pretty direct. As much as we can talk about this, and we've been very positive, as you said, I think the case is that the defense just isn't good. That this is like a bottom 10-ish defense that doesn't scale up in the playoffs, that the offense can't overcome, and they just can't get stops when they really need them to. And I think you get to see a world where they get to the playoffs and they get the wrong matchup, whether it's is it AD and the Lakers in round 2? Is it the Nuggets in the Western Conference Finals? Okay, I see which way you're tilting there. Is it pick
they can
whatever
stop
one
the Lakers
it is?
offense? Let's
okay.
Let's be real.
But it's just I'm sorry, just Yusuf Nurkic defending Anthony Davis is just such a clear tilt of an advantage. And it wouldn't shock me if this team in whenever the buyout market reveals itself, they're okay, we're gonna try Gorgui Dieng. Or just a veteran center who just randomly is on the market because Nurkic. I
feel like Gorgie's available now if they want him.
He is, but it's I just think there's a chance that none of this works, and they're okay, we need a center that we can actually depend on, and doesn't make Frank Vogel feel like he's gonna have a heart attack every time that guy plays drop coverage.
They also can't sign a buyout center who makes more than the mid-level. Thank you, CJ McCollum. Worst case, I have none of the young forwards hit. They don't get enough out of the center spot defensively. Maybe some injuries hit, and they underachieve. I think I don't think regular season wise the defense has a danger of being bottom 10. I think their offense is going to be good enough, so the stats are going to balance. Good offenses tend to have mostly good defenses as long as the talent's decent, and I think that they're going to be good in transition defense. They're going to rebound. They're not going to foul. There's all these things that Vogel does that kind of are cheat codes that his defenses tend to do. I think that it's really just going to come down to the playoff defense. Do they have answers for enough things? Do they have enough pieces to throw at different types of players and different types of schemes? And that's an open question, and it might not be on this roster. So you're absolutely right. I mean, they might have to make a trade, find a buyout player, bail on Nurkic halfway through a playoff series or earlier than that, one game into a playoff series, one half into a playoff series. I don't know. I think that they're betting on we're going to have enough different types of players on this roster that we can make it work and cobble it together. But that's a huge risk, and every single player on this roster outside of Devin Booker was signed last July or sooner. So that's a massive thing to have to click into place over the course of one regular season. It's a big risk.
Let me ask you this as just a Vogel thing before we go to over under. How have your thoughts on him as the hire for this group changed as you've heard him talk, as you've seen him coach some preseason games, and you've kind of got to see in more practical terms what his philosophy is for this particular group?
Yeah, I think the two most important things with Vogel are, one, he's going to experiment, be much more aggressive. I think that we underestimate that with playoff coaches. Somebody like Ty Lue or Eric Spoelstra, Steve Kerr, they're not Steve Kerr started JaMychal Green in the fucking second round last year because he just wanted to mess around, I think Ty Lue, he plays mind games. He tries random stuff. I remember in the conference finals in 2021, he threw Boogie Cousins out there for a half, and they got 15 points out of him because that's just what the best types of coaches tend to do, and they coach their teams to be ready for stuff. And so I think Vogel's more like that than Monty Williams is. And then I think the other thing is he just has more experience. It's kind of similar, but going through the gamut of the postseason, not being afraid to kind of coach and re-scheme and do whatever. What Frank Vogel did in the bubble with that Lakers team, especially defensively, is insane. He has AD guarding Russell Westbrook in one round. Then they're blowing up and blitzing Damian Lillard. Then the conference finals, Davis is guarding Jokic. I mean, a lot of that's AD, and he deserves a lot of credit, but not every AD coach has done that, So I think it's that
also
stuff.
Just amazing in retrospect that that happened in the bubble, and Lakers were like, let's trade for Russ.
Were the Lakers like that, or were a couple members of the Lakers like that? I think that's
was the guy who was guarding Russell Westbrook into that as well as LeBron
maybe,
James. Look, to
maybe
Vogel's
he
credit,
was.
To Vogel's credit, I do think coaching LeBron, as raw of a deal as he got at the end, I do think that's about as good of a prep as you could get for coaching this kind of team.
Yeah, exactly, and I think that matters. And I think it sucks to be it feels very football when teams are we have a bunch of offensive talent, so we're going to hire the DC on the best defense in the league, and then that'll just okay, that's our defense. Feels very much like that, but we'll see. I mean, he has the reputation for a reason. He got a middling defense out of a Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon front court at one point too in there. It's not just Indiana and the Lakers, but the number is 51.5 here over under. I went under.
I did too. This isn't in a way too that makes me feel down on this team. I think we've been overwhelmingly positive about this team. I just think this is a really good conference that's gonna maybe just have some guys miss some time and they win 48 games and are the 3 seed, and it's okay, they're actually the favorites in the West anyway, even though they're the 3 seed, or the second favorites to the Nuggets or something. I think that's kind of what's kind of gonna happen here.
And I think that they will care a lot about the regular season. I feel we like to say, oh, that regular season won't matter. It will, but not so much for the stars. They'll care about how their lineups look, how the role players develop, what works, what doesn't, but they're not going to prioritize getting KD out there for 75 games for no reason. So all that stuff's going to factor in. Only one West team won more than 51 games last year, which was Denver. It's going to be a big adjustment year, as we said. But to make the case on the other side, and the reason I would not touch this if I was actually betting, I think there's actually a lot of outcomes where the Suns blow past this if they're just incredible offensively and the defense is good enough.
Sure.
they posted, again, a plus 18.4 net rating last year when Booker and Durant were on the court. That's astronomical, and those guys are going to share the court a ton. And also, with a similarly questionable defensive roster, no Nick Claxton in Phoenix, I get that, but still, Brooklyn was on a 55-win pace over the first half of last season before KD sprained his MCL. And that was with Kyrie uncertainty, a bunch of young role players, a new team, Steve Nash changing, getting fired, all that stuff. So it is very possible that the Suns, if the West doesn't pop up as much as we think, that the Suns do storm to it. But I also picked over on Golden State and the Lakers, so I have to go. Not everybody's going to hit the over, so that's kind of the point too, I think, here.
Yeah, well, to my fault, I didn't I just kind of am just going vibes every time on this. I'm not really saying I'm not.
I have been up to now, but now we've done so many that I'm it's not just so much the over or the under. It's like if I feel really good about other West teams, then I can't feel good about every West team. Somebody's going to lose some games,
This is not gambling advice, to quote our friend Peter Appel from the Just Basketball Show. All right, Cleveland Cavaliers time. Brendon, this is the Just Basketball preview special. We're moving on to Cleveland. I want you to start with the first question first, and I kind of want to respond because I think these first two questions for Cleveland are very much you could answer them in just like Phoenix, I think in different ways. I think I also might just be, again, being a character of myself with how I decided to answer them. I think that's very possible. Okay. So I want you to tell me most important player first. Who's your most important Cleveland Cavalier?
Evan Mobley.
Okay, I went Max Strus because I'm a piece of shit apparently. So
yeah, I can't be Max Strus.
So look, here's the thing. I've just watched him take shots that no other Cav could take last year, and it's oh right, having someone who can catch a ball on the wing and shoot it without hesitating, and the defense actually freaks out is a really big deal. It's just oh, that's why a lot of teams have spent lots of money. That's why Duncan Robinson got paid a crap ton of money and became a podcaster, right? That skill set was so glaring, and it's watching a different sport kind of when you have a guy who actually just does that and makes all of your lineups function better. It is probably Evan Mobley, but I just felt Strus is just going to make such a massive impact just because he does something that no one else that they had last year can do, that I think is just going to make everything function better. And they've used him on the short roll in the preseason and just actually run different looks to just give themselves some variation on offense that wasn't possible before he got there, which is wild to say for a guy that is not going to be an all-star. He's a very well-played role guy, but what he does is he's the only guy that they have on this team that can do this, and they just didn't have it last year, and it has really showed so far. And I think when you go back and look at last year, it's very clear that there's a reason that it's worth signing, trading, and hard capping yourself and paying this kind of guy $19 million because they just desperately needed it.
It's a totally fair answer, and it will be a breath of fresh air watching them and seeing how his impact shows up in the numbers. And I think actually it kind of leads to Mobley a little bit because he gets you one step closer to some small lineups with either Allen or Mobley as the only big. There's a lot of reasons he's important, but I had to scroll back all the way to the very first preview that we did, Chris, to find a player as, I don't want to say bad, a player at the level of Max Strus, who was my answer for most important, and that was Bilal Coulibaly, because the Wizards don't have any players. So I'm looking down the list. It's Kawhi Leonard, Tyrese Halliburton, Chet Holmgren. We got Zion here. We got Scotty Barnes, Cat. Come on.
I'm too close to the Suns.
You're not going to finish the season let's say the Cavs make the conference finals and push the Celtics to 6 games, and you're going to be thank God Max Strus did that for us. You're going to be wow, Evan Mobley played lights out, or Darius Garland took another big leap, or Jared Allen got his shit together. You're not going to be Max, our Lord and Savior, Max Strus.
No, it's just it's really just I watched the 2 preseason games. I'll see them in person for the first time on Monday against, admittedly, not a good team. It's a not top level Israeli team they're playing. Watching a guy just shoot threes and the defense runs at him because they're scared of him shooting is just oh right, you're allowed to have that on your basketball team. It's like kind of absurd.
Yeah, you are.
Like,
You're speaking as somebody who watched Karis LeVert, Ricky Rubio, and Isaac Okoro take spot up threes for a year, and that's fine.
Yeah. It's just it's heard people like say weird things on podcasts, is I think how the phrase goes.
So okay, let me make the case for Mobley then.
Yeah,
I think Evan Mobley taking a major step forward on either end changes everything for the Cavs.
Yeah.
I'll go through the 4 things that I think could happen and what the ripple effect is. If his ball handling comes along, they can play big more easily. If his shooting comes along, their offensive ceiling just goes way up. If his physicality and force and playing like a center stuff comes along, then they can play small more easily. And then I think if he can defend wings better, then they can switch more, go to another level as far as their defensive versatility and kind of like scariness on that end. Maybe that goes along with playing small too. So it's like I think we kind of oversimplify it because we've known for so long with Mobley dating back to USC that the offense was kind of the thing that needed to keep developing. But it's like he could actually take another leap defensively and they could get better as a result of that. You know, this might not be the year the offensive leap comes, but I think he could even make them a better team by doing some of the other stuff. And maybe the offensive leap is still a year or 2 away, and the team gets better anyway. So I just think that's why it's him, because there's so many pathways to him making them a better overall team in a way that even Garland, who I did think about, I don't think there's as many pathways there because of, honestly, just what he is physically.
The Mobley thing, I think defensively is where I would start with this, because one of the games I went back and rewatched for this was a Heat game they had later in the season, where what they decided to do was say, hey, you're going to defend Jimmy Butler. And it's one of the few times I've seen Jimmy Butler like very hesitant to drive and really struggled with the length of Evan Mobley. And I want to see that done in different ways. They also have this zone that they didn't really run last year, and I think it's because they didn't feel like they had enough size on the wing. Like I think they didn't feel like their wings were big enough, where they would put Mobley at the top of a 3-2 zone, kind of like they talked about it like it was the KG zone from back in the day with the Wolves.
The Liberty do it with Stewie.
Yes. They didn't do it last year, and I think finding a way to bring that back would just like give him like it was ridiculous how good it was his rookie season. The offensive stuff, I think it's a really interesting case study, because you look at Chet and Victor Wembanyama, 2 guys with like similar body types, came in a little leaner. They both came in, I think, more advanced on offense. There's no question about it, right? Like Victor's come in and he's just more advanced. I think Chet, even with the year, even pre the year off, I think you would have looked at him as a better offensive prospect in some ways, right? But Mobley also has had this weird case where, because of they go and get Donovan Mitchell before his second year, he hasn't had the chance. Like his usage went down in year 2, not by a lot, like less than 1%, I think. But it's so rare for a guy like him that at least I think of as highly as I do. I don't want to speak for you necessarily on like where you think he's going to be, but do not get a chance to like expand his role and make a bunch of mistakes and learn and progress. And like his path offensively is just going to, it's hard to project, because he doesn't have the chance to like try a bunch of stuff in games that don't really matter in a way that is kind of typical of guys in his path. Like even Chet this year is probably going to get to do some stuff. That's just him messing around a little bit. That's obviously what Wembanyama is going to get to do in San Antonio. Mobley's not Mobley's not exactly had that opportunity, but there's the way they've talked about him as part of the offense, the way they're using him as more of a hub as a passer in the preseason, does make me think that I think with JB Bickerstaff, I think adjusting the offense some, I do think you're going to see them try to make Mobley a more intentional piece of the offense in the way that he wasn't, aside from being like a lob guy last year.
Yeah, I think I do feel pretty highly about him, and I think part of why the ball handling, I think you and I have talked about this before, that's kind of more, maybe not more important, but equally as important as the shooting is. I think the thing that he has that Chet or Wemby or some of those guys don't, and what makes like the Garnett or Giannis or some of those like seemingly very far-fetched comparisons a little bit more realistic, is his body, and he's a little leaner, like you said, but he's strong as hell and getting stronger. He
added 7 pounds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but he looks bigger this year. Mm-hmm. Like if you told
and
me
he doesn't
had
avoid
15,
contact, right?
Yeah.
Like even when
Yes.
he was skinny, like it's not like he plays to avoid physicality. So I think the ball handling, the ability to like catch the ball and draw a foul, or even end of clock spot up or post up or transition stuff. Those are ways that he can start to make an impact before the jump shot, and maybe if the jump shot never does come along.
The transition stuff is, I think, where we should end this part of it, because something that he is really good at, that they have talked about wanting to emphasize more in some way, and I don't know exactly what this looks like, but it's a thing. He's really good at getting a rebound and just going. And considering how Garland likes to play and how Mitchell likes to play, they both like to take the ball up the floor kind of slow. They start a set at 16 seconds. Like it's a little slow. It's a little like lacks a little bit of urgency. Mobley, when he gets a rebound, like shoots himself out of a cannon and is like at half court in 2 steps because his legs are so long. He can generate, I think, easier looks for a team that's going to need to do that at times. And whether that's like Jared Allen is going to do what Steven Adams did for Russ when Russ got the triple-double and like clear out the way, and then Mobley gets rebounds and goes. I think or Mobley just gobbles up more rebounds this year, particularly when he's playing at the 5. I think that's like a very clear path for offensive growth. Is he just gets to get out on the break, either drive to the rim and get fouled, spray out a pass to someone, and at least create advantages because he's the one guy in the team that wants. It's like him and Okoro are the 2 guys that actually want to play fast. Like no one else really wants to like get things going as much as it would benefit them, Donovan Mitchell, to play a little bit faster.
So I went pretty sicko with the player we're going to be talking about. You went sicko for the most important. I went a little that way with talking about.
I didn't go sicko for this. I went like a guy that I just give me the sicko answer.
Well, no, you go first now. I'm kind of curious what yours is.
I went with Darius Garland.
Okay. It's a little bit of a weird one because 2 of the most important players on the team are also still developing. So it's like it's not like we're not talking about Darius Garland,
Yeah.
Who?
Yeah.
It's like he got maxed out,
Yeah.
it's Darius Garland. Yeah. But okay, tell me what's the next step for him this year?
The seeds are being planted for him to have an uptick in his 3-point rate. He's like been below average like every of his career in terms of 3-point rate. It's like a very glaring part of his shot profile. They're laying the seeds for him to take a bunch more threes in different ways and to take another step forward as a scorer. Like, it is just like on the table the way they're using him as far as using Mitchell off ball a little bit more. Garland's getting run around screens. They ran a set in the first preseason game where Mobley was the hub on offense at above the elbow. Garland feeds to him. Strus sets a back screen for Garland. Garland whips around to the corner because Strus is in the short roll. Strus finds him in the corner for a 3 with Damian Jones because Allen's out with an injury right now, setting the screen for the dunker spot. They're going to do stuff like that with Garland because he can move a little bit more dynamically like that than Mitchell does. He just is a little more fluid in terms of...
And willing.
Because he's just not as... Yeah, willing is a good way to put it. I think there's just like a lot of... There's been food he leaves on the table because he's so unselfish as a passer that I think just forcing him to be more of a scorer and for him to just take more threes as part of the Cavs taking more threes as a team, he's going to spearhead that. And I think you're just going to see a leap for him as a scorer on top of him being, to me, the guy that if I had to put the ball in anyone's hands on this team to make the right decision, it's him. It's not even a question. So I think him as a scorer, you're just going to be like, oh, I think that is very much on the table for him this year, and the seeds are being planted for that to hit reality.
I don't mean this in any one direction more than the other, but it is a testament to how I feel about both players. Darius Garland can be a more valuable offensive player than Donovan Mitchell someday, right?
Yeah, Brendan, he is already right now. I don't know how much better as a passer and a creator for others, but he's just straight up better at that than Donovan Mitchell. It's not close. It's really not close to me.
In that Knicks series, they were at their best when Darius was at his best.
The one game that Darius went off was like a really, really like it was a release foul for the whole team, and particularly I think for Donovan. I think there's reason to be skeptical about this partnership long term, and if Donovan even wants to stick around, I think that's like an open question. I think there's the reason you should be optimistic about it and maybe think it's not a McCollum like Lillard redux in some way is because Darius is just a level of a creator, I think, well above. If he ends up being like the Robin to Mitchell's Batman, let's say, or like he's the Lillard, he's the McCollum, he's just a better creator and willing to play that role in a way that if you build enough defensive stuff around it, and you can with Mobley, you can with Allen, I think there's like a way that works just because Garland can be such a pressure release valve for what Mitchell wants to do and what Mitchell's good at.
Yeah, I think he's going to be really good. Dean Wade.
Could I ask you? Wait. Oh, okay. One last thing, and then we'll talk about Dean Wade. All your accounting needs. Copyrights the low post. Darius Garland, 2019 draft. Is he like number 2 in that? Like, is there a case that he's like? Is he? He's definitely 3 at the worst. But is there a case he's like top 2 in that draft class at this point? Just considering like Zion's.
It's an interesting point in time to think about that, considering Zion and Ja's, inflection point 2023 for each of them. Yeah, I mean, it's drafted 5th, so it wouldn't take much to vault into there. But yeah, I mean, he's right there. It wouldn't be surprising if you're asking me to snapshot it right now if he has like the best career, quote unquote.
Might just be like a round longer than like Zion.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly.
Yeah. All right, so Dean Wade. This is definitely a sicko pick because I think you could just like pick George Niang and you'd be like, that's my answer because
isn't the peak of Dean Wade better than George Niang though, especially on defense? I mean, that's kind of why I picked him. I just think he's a better, more kind of. It's theoretical. I mean, he's obviously struggled with injuries forever, even dating back to college, and that's just. Mm-hmm. Why it all might not matter, but he's been the stats always have loved him defensively when he's on the court. He creates turnovers better than you would think, and he's shot 36% on like 500 career threes. Like, it's still at his best somebody who is probably playing 15 minutes for you in the playoffs or 20 in the regular season. I'm not trying to say that he it's going to be the end-all be-all for this team. But again, speaking back to the ability to have some more lineup versatility, space the floor, some of the things that they were lacking last year, I think he can be one of the missing pieces for some of that stuff. It's not even, to me, him or Niang. It's like maybe it's him or Okoro, or maybe it's him or somebody else, and it just gives them more kind of modern lineup construction in more different situations. And I think if he's healthy, they're going to be able to look a lot different minute to minute over the course of games and series and the season than they were able to last year when, again, it was like Rubio and Okoro and just guys who are very limited.
Well, and particularly a Rubio who just like physically and did not look great. And to be like, as of right now, we have no idea like what he's like, if Rubio's even going to like factor in this team. He's away for the team with mental health issues, but like he could factor in at some point. Here's what I would say about Dean Wade. I think everything you said is right. I think he needs to just sometimes like I think there's two things with him that I would say I'm looking at for him if he's going to really pop. Number one, I want him to take even like more threes. And he's in the 83rd percentile as far as his position, but sometimes he's just like a tad hesitant. I just want him to let him go. Just let him all fly. Like, get up to 70% of your shots from three. Let's just like lean into this all the way. Get up from your 67% last year. Secondly, rebounding wise, if there was this thing you felt when Kevin Love left last year for Cleveland, it's a Dean Wade, like, as maybe he's more dynamic. I think definitely a better defender. He just isn't he hasn't proven himself to be the kind of rebounder that I think you need if he's going to be your small ball forward. Now, the thing with Niang is that's the same thing. That's like one of the things with Niang. He never has rated out as a good rebounder, but he's also played with like Rudy Gobert and Joel Embiid. So it's like, is there some noise in those numbers because he's playing with these two particular centers? I think this is a great shot because I think Wade is going to he has to prove himself a little bit this year because they went out and gave Niang some money, because I think they're going to roll out Okoro at times, because they like Ty Jerome, it seems like, as another guard option. But Wade as someone who can shoot, who can play a couple different spots, who can put the ball on the floor a little bit when you need him to, I think there's a need for this kind of skill set on this team, absolutely. There is very much a path here where he is someone who's like, is this a key role guy in a playoff series? And he was hurt last year at this point.
Exactly. And they paid Niang, but Wade still makes more, so.
No,
like they already.
Niang got the No,
Doesn't he?
Wade's at like 5. No, Wade's at like 5.7, 6.2. Niang's like, I think a little bit above that.
Oh man. Well, still, it's like, I guess my point is they paid Wade also. So you're right.
Yeah,
Niang's at 9. So I was off on that one.
Yeah.
But
it's troubling how easily I knew that Dean Wade makes like $3 million less than George Niang.
I mean, I would hope there's only 15 guys you got to keep track of. All right, best lineup last year. Basically, two different versions. The Karras lineup at the 3 with the other 4 big 4 guys was plus 16.2 for them. The Okoro at the 3 with those 4 was plus 7.8. So both positive. I didn't get too creative with it. I just went the 4 guys with Strus, the starting lineup.
That's the formula, right? Like the formula here is Garland, Mitchell, Max Strus at the 3, upgrade over Okoro or LeVert at that spot, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen. But Brennan, what I would say is if you're projecting this out and you're wondering, okay, how does this team evolve this year? What is the evolution? What is their path to having maybe different kind of looks that hold up in the playoffs? Is there a lineup where Mobley's at the 5 and you slide to one other player? I would say the likely candidates are Niang, Wade, and maybe Okoro, just because I think you need the point of attack defense in certain spots. Could Mobley at the 5 and those lineups with more spacing, with a more dynamic offense, actually kind of rate out a little bit better in larger samples than they have at times, and particularly hold up on the glass in a way that doesn't replace the Allen lineups, but makes you a little bit more comfortable in the minutes when it's just Mobley on the floor by himself?
Yeah, I just don't buy Niang being able to do that personally.
I
like him in the big lineups. I like him when Allen's on the court.
Yes.
But when Mobley's on the
better
court,
fit with Allen.
You have to switch, I think, and you have to have size and on-ball defense to be able to do that. So,
well, even just the
that's
rebounding
why somebody
part
like
of it is
Strus
just,
and Wade and those guys stand out to me more. Yeah, the rebounding part's always going to be hard. I don't really see like a great solution. They don't have PJ Tucker or something to make all that.
They need to like fuse like Kevin Love's rebounding ability with Dean Wade's age, and just like there's your answer.
Mm-hmm.
But
just for reference or for the record, there we go. I combined those two things in my one word there. Mobley and Allen on together. +8 last year. Just Mobley +5. Just Allen +8 also, but a little lower. I'm just rounding. And then both off -1. So they were pretty good no matter what it was, but I think it's just more about playoff stuff and long-term, knowing that they need to be able to kind of mix and match. All right, that gets us into a little bit with the worst case, but we can start with best case. What I had was Strus and Niang help juice the offense. The front office makes a trade to upgrade the LeVert or Allen spot, and the Cavs make the conference finals while also giving Donovan more of a reason to stay long-term.
That's a great way of putting it. The in-season trade stuff is tricky with them because they don't have like an overwhelming amount of assets, but is there like a very well-paid guy that they could cobble together salary for? The name that people like on Cavs Twitter have kind of fantasized about, Brendan, is Jeremy Grant, and that doesn't really do it for me.
That doesn't feel like what they need.
No. It feels like it's like a name. It feels like a name, but it doesn't feel like great.
I mean, like of the guys out there, the one that comes to mind is like Anunoby.
Yeah, but there's like
the bidding war for him is going to price them out probably.
Yeah, they don't have the first to like make the supplemental move to like get someone else to support like what they have.
I don't know who it is. We can circle back on that at some point. I mean, you might have one. You think about it more than me.
I don't have one right now because I haven't like looked at all the salaries and other teams in the way that makes me like sure. And there's some statistical stuff I want to run with some of these new lineups. There's some stuff I want to see, particularly with like Niang and Wade playing next to Mobley. I want to see what Mobley is a little more this year before I'm like, this is exactly what they need. I think is part of it because he is still like Garland is not a finished product, but Mobley is still very much being shaped, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
best
I
case
think,
for me. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, yeah, you definitely want to see what the Garland, Mitchell, Strus, Wade, Mobley lineup is. Maybe you put Niang in there, whatever, before you, because that's a real lineup. Whereas they weren't even really able to get there last year. Worst case,
What
I
if you
have.
swapped out? What if you swapped out? I got to give you my best case too. But what if you swapped out
Go for
Kelton
it.
Johnson for Karis LeVert? Just
I
put
think,
in a big wing.
Sure. I think the defense is still suspect for Keldon, but on a better team with real structure, I think you could bet on that being a good kind of environment for him. Sure, I think that's the type of thing I like that way more than, what was the one you said that Cavs Twitter likes? I already forgot it because I hated it. Yeah, no.
Jeremy Grant. Yeah. Also, I don't want to be the one.
We think of him as being a defender. He just isn't anymore. It's fine. We don't have to pretend Jeremy Grant is a defensive stopper. It's like it hasn't been true since LeBron killed him in the bubble, and we can just skip it.
Also, just telling how easily Aaron Gordon just replaced him in Denver. Shouldn't, if you're that valuable, it shouldn't be that easy for Denver just to go trade for someone who's actually better than you in that role. Best case, it's just that they don't crap the bed again in the playoffs. They make a conference finals run, and I would note that I think that requires some lucky seeding, i.e. Milwaukee and Boston face each other in round 2, and they get just a lesser opponent in the second round where they can get through, because I do think they're going to be a step behind both of those teams and have real challenges with their rosters in defending Giannis and defending Tatum and defending Brown. I think there's just going to be struggles for them in those series. They should have to go through it. It would be good for them, good for Mobley, good for Garland, but you're going to need a little bit of help, I think, to get there.
Yeah. What about Tobias Harris for the Cavs?
I just think that feels like you're trying. He's just up the age curve. It's I think it's hard to be picky, but I want to aim a little younger, I think.
Yeah.
But if you got him on a if you got him on a bargain, it was a second round pick or something, and matching salary, whatever.
Still think Buddy makes some sense for them.
Yeah.
Not not quite the answer we're talking about in terms of a big forward, but just to probably make them better. Why not?
Yeah. Worst case, same place as last year for me. Similar flaws. Get just kind of bullied again in the playoffs, and they leave, and you don't know what that means for Donovan, and you don't really have a clear direction on what this group is supposed to be. As young as some of the guys are, because of the Mitchell component, I do think that if you just kind of do the same thing as you did last year, great regular season team, and don't perform in the playoffs, that leaves you in a very uncomfortable spot.
Yeah, I just said, I was a little more aggressive. I said playing big stops working, and Cleveland starts to get desperate with trades and firings. Now, stops working is really a playoff thing, so it's kind of the same thing you're saying. Obviously, they're going to be good in the regular season. I don't think we know the Mobley Allen thing can work in the regular season, so it's really more of they run up against it in the playoffs again, and then maybe you're talking about not only an Allen or a LeVert trade, but obviously Donovan lingering there, and then head coach, GM, all that stuff starts to come into question when you get desperate like that.
Well, Kobe's president of basketball operations. That guy does not have to fire himself. He's in. It's the fall guy here is JB Bickerstaff. That's the fall guy here. It's
not like a president of basketball operations has never been fired. The owner fires him.
No, but the Cavs ownership situation, obviously, Dan Gilbert's not in the best health. Mm-hmm. This isn't that. If this was the Cavs, Brendan, of 5 years ago, they might have fired everyone in June this year. They might have just tried to hire Chauncey Billups again, like they did before they hired Kobe Altman as GM in 2018. Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel like the vibe around this organization, but I do think Bickerstaff would be the fall guy, and I think he's not among the league's best coaches, but I think he's good, and I think he's been really good for the locker room and relates to those guys pretty well. But if there's a fall guy, it's you fire him and you go try to hire Kenny Atkinson.
You're ready for Jordi Fernandez in Cleveland. You've been ready.
The sell job they would do about the journey from Canton Charge to Cleveland would be look, the Cavs are an organization.
Cavs.com story wrote itself.
I'm available for hire. I'd like money. The Cavs are an organization that told a story about Kobe Altman meeting John Beilein at Mike Gainsey's wedding, who's their GM in title, and it's number 2 in there. And about how Kobe met John Beilein at a wedding, and that's why they hired him. So they're really good at getting out and selling this stuff. Very no notes on how aggressive they are about selling this stuff.
The win total line is 50.5.
Yeah, easy over.
Me too. Statistically, a 55 win team last year. Big Four all played at least 68 games, so that's a little bit. If there is an injury, that would be
Allen's
a problem.
out right now.
Yep. They basically had zero bench last year and still won that many games. And so I think the other part of it too, though, is like the East might only have two great teams. So yeah, those teams might push 60. We don't know yet, depending on how everything shapes up for Boston and Milwaukee. But if you're just making the case, could the Cavs be a tier below them, but still like a step up from everybody else in a pretty weak conference? Like, yeah, the Sixers will probably dip in wins, and we don't know what the Knicks will do and all that stuff. So I think this is one I would feel like if we were doing locks, which we didn't ever do, I would probably put this one as a lock.
There's also just a lot of incentive for them, for them, I think, to chase regular season wins in a way that there might not be for some of these other teams. Like, there's just a lot to gain for them to saying, can we chase 58 wins, and where does that get us? And like, even if that overperforms their net rating over the course of a year, and like you look at that and say, okay, that's a little bit inflated. It doesn't benefit them to not chase the regular season, I think, in a major way, to give themselves any advantage they can when you get to the playoffs.
And even Donovan, like, he's the only vet that you might, and Allen, but it's not like there's no Durant on this team. There's no LeBron on this team. Somebody you need to load manage or anything like that. So the health stuff, it's like it's an interesting factoid that they were so healthy, but I'm like, I'm not going to bet on them to have a bunch of injuries. Like, who? Nobody. I mean, Wade, I guess, still, but okay, whatever.
It'd probably be Allen. He usually misses some time. Like he missed time last year, and he missed time the year that they ended up in the play-in tournament and got bounced. Like, it was because Allen got hurt and missed a bunch of time.
Yeah.
Did we make a mistake by not talking about Donovan Mitchell more? We have to go, but like, did we not talk about him enough, considering like who he is and what he is?
I just don't know if he's going to be better than he was last year, and he's been around for a long time. So if we're thinking about. Yeah, it's one of the limitations of us doing 30 minutes on every team instead of an hour, I guess. But like, I think people know about Donovan Mitchell, so
yeah.
Watch some YouTube highlights if you're wondering who Mr. Spida is. I think there's plenty of stuff out there for you.
I will say I'm curious for him, considering he came in last year really motivated in a new situation, and after getting embarrassed in the playoffs, we got embarrassed in the playoffs again. I kind of feel like there's a lot on the line for him in terms of like his standing in some ways right now, and I'm really curious to see just kind of what Mitchell, like how he was amazing. I think last year was the best year of his career. How does he follow it up after another playoff disappointment, I think, is a real question. And it's not going to be one we can answer for a while. It's not as easy as some of the Garland questions or the Mobley questions, I think, are to kind of project. But I think this is a really pivotal year for a guy that's absolutely in his prime and also has his future kind of maybe more than anyone in some of the teams we've talked about. Like, one of the guys that I think whose future is probably the most like discussed in some ways as far as the next couple of years of player movement in the league.
Yeah, let's maybe make a point of talking about him either in the lead up to the season in some way or in one of the early season shows, because I definitely have thoughts. I also just try to make these previews relatively optimistic, and I'm kind of a Donovan hater coming off of last year, so I didn't want to just... I mean, I feel very good about this team. I think they're going to be even better than last year, so I'm not going to like sit there. Plus, the Donovan story right now is just the trades, and like that's not really the spirit of what we always try to focus on, so,
No. We did we do slop of the I can't remember anymore. Did we do slop of the week where the New York Post was like the Knicks might want to use Evan Fournier's expiring to get one? Oh, we did, to get Mitchell, Gobert.
I think you brought it up, yeah.
Yeah. That's like if he's getting traded, you can like take this to the bank. It's next summer if it happens. If it's going to happen, it's not going to be in season. I would be flabbergasted if he got dealt in season.
They have no real reason to do that. I mean, unless it just got so ugly that it was like a toxic situation day to day behind the scenes and stuff. But I don't think it's going to get there. Why would?
Yeah, he doesn't strike me as that kind of guy in general. But all right, we've left it here. This has been the Just Basketball Extravaganza pod, dare I say, for Monday, October 16th. This is really, Brendan, to me, I gut feeling one of our best episodes, I think, to me.
Okay.
But we got a WNBA Finals game. We got the previews for the two teams that we cover day to day on our other endeavors. I think just a big day for the show.
If we can't do that one, if we can't do this one well, if we can't swing and hit this one out of the park, I feel like we shouldn't probably be doing this show. So I agree
I
with
think- I
you.
think-
We did a good
I
job.
think we
Pat ourselves on the back. The audience
Yeah.
should thank us in the comments and hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
And we got another WNBA Finals game and a bunch of teams we
Yes.
know less well to talk about next time.
Programming notes coming up. We're going to preview, among other teams, the Toronto Raptors this week. And Wednesday night, because our recording schedule falls on a Tuesday this week, YouTube only. Well, maybe you could throw up an audio. It wouldn't be too hard for me to mix. But primarily on YouTube, WNBA Finals Game 4 recap from Brendon and I after Liberty Aces Wednesday night in New York. Please tune in for that. Please subscribing and everything. Enjoy the hoops. NBA season's almost here. Talk to y'all next time.